Don't forget to like and subscribe.
Ladies and gentlemen, hold on to your mugs, fasten your seatbelts, because our next guest doesn't just enter a room. He explodes on the scene like a trained stuntman through a brick wall, script in one hand, camera crew in the other. He's the kind of artist who doesn't wait for the doors to open. Well, he builds his own studio, sets it on fire, for the scene, of course, and shoots it all in one glorious take. Now, his Ottawa born roots, part class clown, part bartender, stand up hybrid. John has evolved into a one man cinematic universe. Now, you may have seen his magnetic presence in The Boys, Reacher, Titans, Fubar, Law and Order Toronto, Paranormal Night Shift, Riverdale, The Last Fall, The Man in Room 6, A Desperate Road, The Fifth Chamber, and more. But honestly, those credits, that's just the trailer for John. Behind the scenes, he writes, produces, directs, and still finds time to sponsor a race car because, of course, he does. Now, in 2021, he went full amateur with Butterfly, writing, producing, directing, and starring in it. Now, since then, well, he just hasn't stopped. His company, Screaming Goat Films, is a beast, delivering shorts like a horror thriller, Stairwell, and a twisted comedy, Confused. Films that punch you in the guts, twist your expectations, and still leave room to laugh. This man doesn't just act, he builds legacies. He's got the presence of a heavyweight, the hustle of an indie startup, and the clarity of someone who's done the grind and still shows up hungry. He doesn't just support the arts, he lifts up the whole dang community with him. And when he's not on set, he's literally in the fast lane backing Max Haverkart's 2025 racing season with Tots Autosports. So whether he's directing a film, championing the next great indie, or watching a race car tear past with his company logo on the spoiler, John proves that passion, purpose, and horsepower go a long way. Raise your mugs, cue the smoke machine, and welcome to the show, the filmmaker, the performer, the full throttle producer, the unstoppable force, John Thomas Gauthier. John, thank you so much for your time and welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. I don't know how any interview in the future is going to top that introduction. So thank you, thank you so much for that. I can't introduce myself better than that. So you did absolutely a stellar job. Thank you, Chris.
No, I appreciate that. And listen, you're going to have to start living up to all of that hype.
I'll do my best, and I'll share my story, share my rises and my falls, my goods, my bads, my ins and outs, and I'll be nothing but honest and straightforward as I always try to be.
Perfect. You know, John, I want to rewind the clock with you here. I've learned so much about you, and I want to talk to little John if that's possible. I know
Absolutely.
you're 6'5", 230 on a good day.
Yeah.
When little John was growing up in Ottawa, what did he want to do?
Always be an actor. That's a very easy question to answer for me. And I mean, everyone gets asked when they're a kid, what do you want to be when they grow up? And a lot of people say astronaut or actor or whatever it could be. But ever since I can remember, it's always been about performing. Whether it's always been specifically an actor, I can give you probably somewhere in the 90th percentile that's always been the case, but it's always been about performing. I've always had a passion primarily for making people laugh, but at the end of the day, any opportunity I get just to give people something to talk about and just to leave them with some sort of an emotion or some sort of a feeling after an encounter with me or any of my work, it's always been to entertain. That's always been my passion, always been my pride, always been my joy, and it's always been my life goal. There is honestly nothing else on this planet I could ever see myself doing. And it's one of those things that I love so much that I can confidently say I'll do this till I am no longer of this world.
Now, John, you grew up in Ottawa, which is
Hmm.
basically a government city. And you
Very
grew
much.
up, yeah, and you grew up in the 80s and the 90s. And I didn't grow up in Ottawa, but I'm going to assume, much like my own area here, in the 80s and the 90s, arts, that really wasn't the scene and it wasn't what it is today.
Hmm.
So growing up, how did you get involved? Like, what were your steps? And, there you maybe had the local community theater, but there wasn't the vibrant life that there is now.
Hmm. Well, I mean, the thing with Ottawa, it's only been in the last I want to say, let's say maybe the last decade, truly only in the last 5 years that it's really come onto the scene as sort of a heavier hitter in film. Ottawa's had a pretty good arts foundation with the Ottawa Little Theatre, the NAC. There's always been somewhat of an artistic presence, but you did hit it on the head when you said government town. Ottawa's a very quiet town. The streets roll up at 10 p.m. kind of thing. There's not much of a crazy night scene. When you think film, when you think TV, you don't really think Ottawa. Now, there is an ever-growing number of productions in Ottawa. Like I said, specifically in the last 5 years, it's broadened quite a bit in terms of the kind of stuff that they're shooting there. But only really in, let's say, the last 10 or 15, it was a lot of MOWs, a lot of Hallmark movies, a lot of smaller productions. And jumping into my mid late 20s before I started really taking things seriously, I'm completely covered in ink. So I don't get many looks at for the boyfriend or the neighbor next door in a Hallmark movie, let's say. I don't fit the look. So when I was growing up, honestly, it was a lot of school plays. It was a lot of messing around with my cousins. My dad had one of those old over the shoulder VHS. You put the actual VHS tape into the camcorder, one of those, shooting stuff like that. I was very fortunate to have a very unique group of friends in high school that were a lot of guys making crazy videos and films and stuff like that. Definitely not the jocks. It was much more of the nerdy guys that hung around playing hacky sack, under the stairs kind of group. And I was very, very fortunate to have some support at home. My grandmother was probably my first real fan. Whenever I would do silly voices or silly accents or a silly little skit, she was always the first to laugh. She was always the first to encourage me to do kind of silly things. My grade six teacher, Mr. Donlin, whenever we would go around in class, when you're in elementary school, everyone reads a paragraph when you're reading a book in class to practice your vocal skills. And I would always be putting in sound effects or adding voices. And rather than discourage it or say, stick to the script, he was very much supportive of me doing voices and little kinds of things. And in my late teens, early 20s, when I kind of got into the bartending, we had a family pub in Westboro, so kind of midtown Ottawa. And my grandfather was the owner and operator. And he was a musician, he was in a band, he was a stand-up comic, he was a bartender, he was everything. So it was a lot of the things that I learned on how to work a crowd or how to engage with people or how to have some confidence when dealing with people. I learned a lot from him and kind of observing him. So while it was not necessarily a classically trained theater background or film background, I did pull a lot of inspiration and a lot of tools from some very different aspects of my life at a young age. And it was around my mid late 20s that I decided to kind of pursue acting as a serious thing. There was a small Irish production called Drama at Inish, and that was going on at the Ottawa Little Theatre. And my mother, of all people, was, there's a play going on. You should probably audition for it. And I hadn't been on stage in probably close to 10 years. My last production was probably a high school play after that when I was 17, let's say. So I auditioned for a role. I didn't get one of the leads, but the director, Sarah O'Hearn or Sarah Hearn, I believe, she said, loved your accent. It was an Irish play, so you needed to have an Irish accent. Luckily, growing up around an Irish family, I had the accent pretty well dialed in. So I got a smaller role in the play, and it was then that I kind of reignited the passion for entertaining and being on stage and doing fun things and telling stories. And that kind of gave me the kick in the butt to say, you know what, if I'm going to take this seriously, there's nothing really wrong with Ottawa, but it's not for me in terms of what I want to do with my career and where I can go. So I took the big plunge and moved to Toronto in my early 30s, and I haven't looked back since.
You've said a lot there, and I love it, and it's honestly an amazing story, and I really do. You said two things that I think were just so, wait a minute here. One is that, Ottawa's turned into this Hallmark world and that you don't fit the bill. I'm going to tell you that you do. I could definitely see Hallmark getting you as the leading man or the small town boyfriend where they're coming back and you win the girl over 100%.
Hmm.
John's going to be in a Hallmark movie coming soon. We don't know when, but I'm putting it out there, everybody. Hallmark, if you're watching and listening,
Hmm.
John right here is your next guy.
Yeah.
And the other thing that you said that very surprising for me is you would hang out under the bleachers with the guys doing hacky sack. Listen,
Yeah.
I know we're not talking to 17-year-old or 13-year-old John here, but I find it very hard that you weren't, in the mechanic shop or out on the sports field or something like this. You're going to tell everyone watching, no, I was under the bleachers playing hacky sack with the nerdy group.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, it was how I would describe myself specifically around the age, let's say 16, when that was grade 10, when I kind of came into my own, that I got along with everyone, but I wasn't necessarily part of any one group. I was very much a butterfly. I could talk to anyone. I could roll with the jocks. I could roll with the nerds. I could roll with the stoners. I could mesh with whoever I had to mesh with. And I mean, attribute that to the chameleons that so many of us actors are. You have to pivot and you have to adapt as best as you can. But I'm really an extroverted introvert. I love the attention. I love being the spectacle. I love being the center when I'm comfortable, when I'm confident, when I'm happy. So, being 6'5" and 230, yeah, a few years ago, I'm closer to 250 now, but that depends on what they need me for. But I really do try to observe and sit back and play as small as I can unless I'm feeling confident and feeling like, I deserve to be here. So whether you want to attribute that to a little bit of an imposter syndrome, all of us actors know what that is, or attribute it to, not quite feeling like I'm in one specific box. It was very much, I'd rather just kind of be off to the side, not necessarily a full-on wallflower, but kind of off to the side doing my own thing with a very small group, and then poking my head out every once in a while and dabbling a little bit, but definitely not a mechanic, definitely not a jock, um, definitely not a nerd, kind of an amalgamation or a mix of everything. But I try as best as I can to kind of blend in, as hard as that is. And yeah, it was very much me. You can talk to any of my old high school buddies. It was not Johnny was not front row center. Johnny was there, but he was kind of doing his own thing off to the side.
The tall kids at the back of the picture. No, I get it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I love that you've said this. You said, actors are kind of this chameleon because we have to be, but you've said it was like this introverted, extroverted,
Hmm.
right? You're going to watch, observe, and then when you feel comfortable, you're going to step in and
Hmm.
go from there. Do you feel that when we talk about stuff like that, that's where your ability to portray different things come from? Like, I'm going to bring my own, but who is my own? I'm an introvert
Hmm.
right now, and once I get comfortable, boom, there we go.
Yeah, I think it's very important, and I mean, I can only speak for myself, but it's very important that I have an understanding of where I'm going with the character, or if I'm doing something, there has to be a purpose. There has to be some sort of drive behind it, and there has to be some truth to it. I mean, you can bring any aspect of yourself to a character. There always should be some aspect of yourself in a character, whether you're playing a serial killer or you're playing the boyfriend next door. Like there has to be some of you in it. And for me, it really takes time for me to understand where does John fit in this? No matter what the character is, where does John fit inside this character? What's the purpose? I'm not going to say, what's my motivation, as a lot of actors like to say, but where do I fall into this character's psyche? Where do I fall into this persona? And how can I capitalize and once again play it as honestly as possible in a way that makes me feel comfortable and confident?
I like that you've said this. So my question for you is, some actors will say, "What's my motivation for the scene? What's the motivation of the character?" Why is it that we do that versus trying to bring ourselves to it and being a little bit more true and honest? It's kind of like, I think John is looking for this versus
Mhm.
me just walking in the frame and doing it.
I think a lot of actors lack confidence. You'll speak to a lot of actors, whether you're just starting out or whether you're seasoned, and a lot of us, myself included, aren't necessarily comfortable with the audition process. There's a lot of times where we're looking for either feedback or guidance from the director or the writer. It's like, how do you see me doing this? How do you see the character? When really it's up to us. It's got to be us. It's, your audition is your one shot to show who you believe the character is. So when you're asking what's my motivation, it's almost like this, you're grasping for an olive branch, or you're reaching out for some sort of help or guidance. And I don't want to say it stems from a lack of confidence, but there definitely is, like I said before, some imposter syndrome and some unsurety. We want to do a good job, we want to book the role, we want to please, we want some form of validation. That's that dopamine hit or whatever it is, right? So when I hear myself going towards what's my motivation, or how do they want me to play this, how do they see the character, it's really important for me to stop myself and say, well, no, this is how I see the character. There's lots of auditions you get where it'll say right at the bottom, standard American accent, or
Yeah.
play a deadpan, or whatever it is. And sure, give them what they want if they're giving you notes, but if you see the character, maybe he's got a New York accent, maybe he's got something different about him. If you want to do something that showcases your abilities and helps you stand out, there's nothing wrong with trying that. I've booked a couple of jobs where there's been no request for an accent whatsoever. So you'll do your standard take, what you believe the character is, and then do another one, give them a crazy accent, give them something that they're not expecting. And even if you don't book the role, or they say that's not what we wanted at all, chances are they're going to remember you.
You've touched on something here with this guidance, and I'm going to go to this hand-holding moment, and it's this. You take the workshops, you go to school, you learn how to be an actor, you're a trained actor, and the entire time someone has said, stand here, look left, tilt your chin down, eyebrows to the right, to the left, and then you get the audition, and the audition is, okay, figure it out.
Hmm.
And you've just spent all of this money and this time on someone telling you. And then the breakdown is, we want you to wake up in the middle of the night, but you're floating and your cat's upside down, but make it real. And then it's like, well, I'm not sure how to do that. So we look for that guidance. I
Yeah.
think it's really neat that you've touched right on it. It's like right there.
Well, yeah, and it's really funny that you're saying that. You could be the most prepared in the world. You could have your lines 100% bang on as you've practiced them over and over and over and over again. And you get into that audition room, or you get on that Zoom call, and maybe the reader you're working with has a different cadence than you were expecting. Or maybe the director stops you halfway through and says, okay, try it this way. It's so important to have that confidence in yourself and the ability to pivot. And a lot of directors, a lot of casting directors, in my experience, they will take note of that, specifically in your in-person or your Zoom auditions. It's so normal to be nervous, to be scared. We want to try so hard. We want to do good. We want to be impressive. We want to be memorable. And we put so much focus on that oftentimes we lose sight of simply being ourselves. And that genuine performance, you flub a line but you recover, or you ad lib a little bit and you say things the way that you think the character would say things. It's not necessarily 100% on book, but more often than not, whether you book the role or not, you become memorable. You become some sort of a vessel that activates something in that casting director, or in that director, or in the writer if they're in the room, and say, you know what, I never thought about that for that character, but that makes way more sense. And once again, whether you book it or not, if you can be memorable simply because you are being genuine and authentic, that is the goal. That's the win. You've already got the part. It's up to you to convince them of it. And if they don't see it that way, that's fine. On to the next audition.
So, John, you said the word, nervous, and I'll even push that towards anxiety and getting our own way. What what makes John nervous? You get that audition, you get that breakdown, you're a seasoned actor, you know what you're doing. And then all
Mhm.
of a sudden, what's that nervous moment for you?
For me, speaking about myself, it's always that first take. Whether it be a tape that you submit, or whether it be in the room, or whether it be over a Zoom, it's making sure that I hit what I wanted to hit, whether it be getting the emotion across, conveying the message of the scene, hitting my lines. It's getting that first one out of the way. And whether I kill it or not, or whether it falls apart and I say, can I do that again? It's always the first one. And I think it's just kind of that first swing of the bat, the first shot, just to be like, okay, cool, I deserve to be here. And it's once that first one gets out of the way, then I'm able to kind of suppress that imposter syndrome, kind of suppress the nerves a little bit, be a little bit less anxious. So the nerves for me, or the anxiety for me, always comes from, if I don't do this right the first time, I'm not going to be able to do it right the second or third or fourth, or God forbid, when I get to set, I've done all this work and I forget my lines and they think I'm a terrible actor, and then the spiral begins
Yeah.
and all that kind of stuff. And it's so important that anyone watching this, specifically the younger or fresher actors, it doesn't matter who you work with or how big the production is. I've seen A-list celebrities duff their lines or flub or forget and need a minute to take a step back and redo everything. So the pressure we put on ourselves to be perfect is impossible to attain. I would always say that have all the anxiety, have all the nerves, have all the fear, but at the same time, have all the fun. Just have all the fun, because at the end of the day, this is our passion, this is our art, this is what most of us, I would hope, would like to do for the rest of our lives. And it's not for the money, it's not for the fame, it's not for the blue checks. It's for the sheer fact that we love to entertain and we love to tell stories. So if you can get that little voice inside your head, and at whatever point in your audition process, have that voice be a little bit louder than the one who's saying, you can't do this, you're going to mess your lines up, you're going to forget, then you're going to win more often than you're going to lose, especially in the audition room.
You brought up something interesting here with the take, right? The most people are going to blub that first take. And we
Hmm.
now know that the majority of stuff is these eco casting and self tapes, which saves a lot of people from driving all around for a 30-second in the room. How many takes do you, let's say this, how many takes would you do? If John gets that breakdown, you look at it, you know the first one's going to kind of be a whatever. How many you do before you say, you know what, it's not going to get any better than that. It's really not going to be any different. Three,
Hmm.
four, seven. What do you think your number is?
That's a very good question. I probably wouldn't have had a specific answer if you had asked me a couple years ago, but learning what I've learned and knowing what I know now and listening to some fantastic actors and performers, uh, Matthew McConaughey, I don't know if it was recently, but I recently saw a video about him, on him talking about this. And after the first, maybe second take, anything after that is overthinking. The first two or three takes, that's acting. That's being as genuine as you can be. Anything after, let's say, three takes is you trying to adjust, you trying to fabricate, you trying to not necessarily change, but create in your head and translating it onto the film what you may believe that the director may want. So I think really, the first two, maybe three, are going to be the most genuine, the perfect combination of authenticity, nerves, and creativity. So if I had to put a number on it, three. If I had to put it on, it's so difficult. I know everyone's so different. For me, when I get a tape, I get the breakdown. I'll set up my camera in selfie mode just so I can kind of figure out my space,
Mhm.
and I'll figure out, okay, these are my eye lines, this is my exit, this is my enter. If I have props or not, okay, these are going to be in frame enough. This is where my body language, my shoulders should be positioned. I'll shoot one just to make sure I have the lines down and to make sure everything is in frame where I need it. and then I'll shoot maybe two, maybe three if I want to do something really, really different or try something different. But once again, if I had to pick a number, I'd say three.
You had said something where you talk about your framing. Here's your eye lines, here's where your shoulders are going to be. But the part that I heard you say was your enter and exit.
Hmm.
And most people might not know this or understand this. Why do you have to know where your entrance and exit is? Why do you have to enter the scene as opposed to just being there? Why do you have to exit? Why can't you just end it?
Well, I mean, great question. A lot of times, if you look at your breakdowns, the sides that you're getting, so the short scripts that you're getting to do, they're either mid scene or they're in the middle of a script. You know, they're not page one. We're not getting necessarily the beginning of what a character is or who a character is. We're not getting their beginning of their journey or the end of their journey. We're getting somewhere in the production or in the piece that is in the middle, let's say. So there's been a lot that's happened before, and there is probably some stuff that is yet to happen to this character. So the physical entering and exiting for me gives me an ability when I walk into frame to display body language, to display once again authenticity, to show perhaps a sense of urgency, perhaps, a little bit of confidence, whatever body language that you can bring to a character. There's a great opportunity when you're entering frame to showcase not just through the words that you're saying, but through the body language who this character is. If it's a big bravado character like a Gaston, be chest up, shoulders back, chin held high, so by this body language before my character even speaks, oh, this guy's, he's cocky, he's confident. Whereas if it's slumped over, kind of avoiding eye contact, head kind of turned to the side, like what's this guy so shy about? Oh, well, you already know he's shy. So that kind of puts you into the realm of understanding the character a bit more. And it's kind of the same thing with the exit. It's, this character is going to be going somewhere. There's going to be somewhere that he's got to go or something that he has to do. So once again, there's an opportunity to exit frame as this character and give you one less opportunity to show who you are. There's a lot of times where actors will get sides where it may only be two or three lines. It might only be one line if it's
Mhm.
a small actor role. And if you have to stand out, you have to convey some sort of ability as an actor that say this is why I deserve the role, because whether it's one line or whether it's a lead, I am who this person is. I'm going to show you who he is. I'm not just going to say who he is. So
So when we look at your career and your accomplishments and everything that you've done,
hmm.
and we say, you know what, even as a seasoned actor, I still find that I get challenged or I find this challenging, whether it's reading a breakdown, editing your own self tapes, or just
Hmm.
trying to find the right moment to film. I mean,
Hmm.
everyone's working, you work, you come home. Is that the time when you do it, or do you wait a couple
Hmm.
of hours? What do you find the most challenging about the whole process?
If I had to pick the most, yeah, the most challenging thing about the process is maintaining hope. There is going to be a lot of times where you're going to be sitting with yourself and having doubts and having concerns. And there could be years where you'll book six, seven, eight, nine, 10 things. And you're like, this is it. I'm blowing up. I'm on top of the world. This year was amazing. I can only imagine what next year is going to be. And then, like this year, it's unfortunately been comparatively a slower year. And having that ability to sit with yourself and not listen to that voice to be like you made a mistake, you're a has-been, you're forgotten, you're never going to get your big break. Just having the ability to have hope is the hardest thing. I was on set a couple years ago for Brilliant Minds, and we had an actor on there, an extremely seasoned actor. He was an A-lister, and I was sitting with another actor. We were sitting in the area waiting for our scene to start. And the actor I was sitting beside, we were having a conversation. Oh, we're doing this. This is great. Okay, you have anything else coming up? And then we both learned that we both booked the same movie shooting again in 2 weeks. And oh my God, we get to work together again in 2 weeks. Where is it shooting? What are we doing? All this. And this Hollywood elite seasoned actor turned to us and he said, wow, that's really great, guys. This is the first thing I've booked in 18 months. So a year and a half, this legitimate household name hadn't worked in a year and a half. And we're sitting there as essentially nobodies. And this is our third of four for gigs of the year. And it's March. And just to know that it happens to everybody. I don't care if you're number one on IMDb or if you're number 3 million on IMDb. Um, there is going to be times when you're not going to book, and you may not book for potentially years, and you have to have hope. At the end of the day, that's the hardest thing. And I have a very supportive girlfriend. She's amazing. And we have lots of conversations revolving around doubt and imposter syndrome and like why can't I book? I did so well last year. What's going on? Is it the industry? Is it the climate? Am I not the right fit for the niche going on right now? And at the end of the day, everything revolves around having the hope and the confidence in yourself that this too shall pass.
And when we talk about hope, and I've loved that you've said that, hope that you're doing it right. You know you are. You're in the room for a reason. Sure, you didn't get that one. You're going to get the next one, and that belief in yourself. So what is that hope of the White Whale project for John?
It's you're great with these questions. For me, my first love was comedy. I think it will always be my true love. I'm well aware of how I look. I spent the better part of a decade putting on a lot of size, growing out the hair, growing the beard, getting absolutely covered in tattoos. I play a lot of tough guys, a lot of bad guys, a lot of bikers, a lot of Vikings. But if I could land some sort of, even if it's, let's say, a Marvel movie, but if it's a comical character, something revolving around comedy, that would be the number one for me because there's something about making people laugh that is an absolute pinnacle of highs for me. So if it was let's say, with Batista's career, I think his best work was Drax in Guardians of the Galaxy. He was so funny. Big guy, you're expecting him to be super tough and super dangerous and vicious and all that kind of stuff. But he was so gut-wrenchingly funny in that role. And, that's the kind of performance that kind of got him in to where he is now. And it's like, okay, cool. If he can do that real good comedy with that great timing as the giant performer that he is, what else can he do? And then he got, that small role in Blade Runner 2049 that showcased his dramatic chops. Okay, he can also do drama. And then that led him to other roles and letting him to expand his career. And for, the time that his name was chosen or called to be like, whatever you want to do, Dave, we've got your back. So doing things like the Knives Out franchise and the Knock at the Cabin and I Spy and all that kind of stuff. I really, really admire Dave Bautista's career because he didn't let his size necessarily pigeonhole him. He can always play a tough guy. When you're that big, like when you're 6'5", 230, 240, 250, covered in tattoos, there's an expectation. And
Hmm.
that's that you're going to be the tough guy, you're going to be the bruiser, you're going to be the villain. But to win over hearts with comedy, especially at that size, that's the pinnacle for me. Definitely some sort of comedy. That would be the top of the tree for me.
What I'm hearing is a Hallmark movie and a comedy movie coming up next,
Yeah, yeah.
which are going to be great things. And
Hmm.
John, I want to touch lightly on this. Acting, we have to put ourselves in these vulnerable positions, right? We have to bring our truth to it and what's our motivation, and we really have to let down our guard and have someone else guide us to what we need to do while we're doing this. But at the same time, you sponsor race cars, which has incredible precision where you have really no room for the margin of error. And when
Hmm.
we wear multiple hats, and I understand, hey, today we're an actor, tomorrow we're a race car, this day we're a producer and writer. What do you do for that mental clarity? What does John do to say, you know what, I need a minute of mental clarity? What do you do?
I've spoken about this on, I think it was another podcast that I did. Um, I think it was with Allison Mullings on the Creative Time podcast, where I do kind of an audible reset. And I've caught myself doing it for years back in my bartending days. So when I need a reset or I need to walk away from a situation, for me, I'll give myself a clap. It's almost like with a slate. I'll just to give myself kind of an audio cue as a bit of a reset, and that kind of brings me back down to a baseline. And I know it may seem odd, but that's just always worked for me. And I caught myself doing that years ago, when I started working in nightclubs, and it's just you're getting pummeled with sound and music and people yelling and laughter and noises and lights and all this kind of stuff. And just when I need kind of a mental reset, I'll give myself a clap and a reset. And it's funny when you're talking about the race cars, because anything that revolves around a live sporting event or anything of that degree of speed, there's no guarantees. There's you can set up all the cameras in the world and you may miss the shot because the car flies around the corner on an angle you weren't expecting, or the car may not start, or the car may crash on the turn before it gets to your camera and all that kind of stuff. So with all the planning and all the preparedness you can have, it's not always going to go to plan. So you have to have that ability to pivot at a second's notice. And that translates into auditions and into performances on set. You've got your lines memorized, you know your mark, you know the energy of the scene, you know the pace, and then all of a sudden you could hear, okay, cut, stop, reset, try it this way. And then you're just like, oh, okay, well, I wasn't really ready for this. And it can go one of two ways. You can either, adapt or die, sink or swim, as they say. So it's very important that you have that ability in you somewhere that can give yourself kind of a reset, no matter what it is, to be like, okay, cool, give me a second. Okay, now we can proceed.
I love that you've said that because it's you're out there and all you hear is cut, John. What I want you to do is play it as a 1920s gangster. Then you start getting cut. You know what? Actually, an Irish guy who can't walk. And oh, wait a minute, cut. And you say, what?
And that happens. Like that happens. They could say, right before you're sitting in your trailer finishing the final touches on your costume, about to walk out, and then you get a little knock, knock, knock. The director would like to speak to you. And then it's just like, where you're actually going to do the whole scene as a mute. So there's no monologue. You have to mime everything. And you're just like, what? I mean, okay, give me a minute and I'll figure it out. So
I really want to see you in that role.
the world's biggest mime. Yeah.
And John, I want to ask you a quick question here about community.
hmm
And when we talk about community, we talk about this industry specifically. It is one of those things where you really do have to have a good community around you. How do you find that? How do you find the right people to say, I'm going to be with John now and he's going to lift me up when I'm knocked down, or,
hmm
we're going to do this project. How do you find that sense of community if you're just starting out?
If you're just starting out, um, we all come from different backgrounds. I think we all have to kind of navigate these waters in our own way. When I moved to Toronto, I knew nothing. I knew nobody in the industry. So I did what a lot of people do is I started with the Facebook groups. So whether it be Powerhouse Casting or Jigsaw Casting or eBoss or Mandy.com, whatever it is, to get you in the door with various casting directors, kind of put your footprint in, start getting out to these, little classes. If you can audit an acting class, great. If you can show up to meet and greets with casting directors, also great. But for me, after, the first commercial, let's say, and you start physically shaking hands with people, and you start going to these meet and greet events, and you start meeting people who are like-minded and who share similar values, it really is important that you trust your gut and that you develop some sort of a radar. Um, just like with any industry, there are people out there who are doing it for the right reasons, and there are people who are out there doing it for maybe the wrong reasons. There's a difference between being an actor and being a celebrity. Some people want to be an actor, some people want to be a celebrity. Are you doing this for the attention, for the fame, for the clout, or are you doing this because you genuinely love to entertain? And I've been very, very fortunate to have a pretty good radar. I can really thank 20 plus years of bartending for that, just because you kind of have to have an ability when you meet someone to know within the first 5 seconds, do you want me to make your drink and leave you alone, or do you want me to pour you whiskey and talk about philosophy for the next 2 hours? You really have to be able to read people. You have to have a good radar. And I'm not saying that, that's imperative, but it's very important that you learn quite quickly who you want to be around and who you are, because you will attract people based on the energy you're putting out. I try to build a longer table and not build a higher fence, as they say. So the people that I bring into my productions, whether they be the makeup artists, the costume designers, co-producers, actors, directors, who it is, I've really tried to do my best to vet them beforehand, whether it be through a coffee date or going over their resume or through reputation.
Mhm.
Everyone has a reputation, and when you're in this industry long enough,
Mhm.
and I really try and make it a point to kind of choose people who share my similar values. And everyone has, different goals in this industry. Some people just want to write. Some people just want to do stunts. Some people just want to act. And there's nothing wrong with that. But to align yourself with people who have similar goals and who have similar skill sets is so important, because the collaboration moving forward is just so much more fluid and so much easier to do. And then when you have that real strong base, that backbone, that nucleic circle of people that you can trust completely with your projects and with your vision, it just becomes so undeniably magnetic that more and more people are drawn to you and want to share in that for the right reasons. But the way that I treat people and the way that my company treats people, I believe that we've garnered a very positive reputation in the industry, and it's one that is based on respect and an open mind.
Oh, I love that you said that. And John, where can people learn more about you?
So obviously we all have our IMDb's. My production company is Screaming Out Films. I have been very, very blessed to have probably one of the hardest working people in film. My business partner is Madison Kahn, and her and I met. We had a chance meeting about 5 years ago. I was at a TIFF event. I think it was at Lavelle, and I had left the group I was with to go to the bathroom, and there was this young woman sitting alone at the bar, and the bar was on the way to the bathroom. She was sitting alone, and I walked by her and I said, "Hey, you look alone. Do you want to do a shot?" And she said, "Sure." So we literally had a shot of tequila. Said, "Date, I'll see you around. See you later." And I left. And then the following year, I was once again at a TIFF event, and it was at Marble this time. And I was with a couple of buddies, and I was approached by two women, and she was one of the women, and she said, "Hey, do you remember me?" And I said, "I'm really good with faces, terrible with names. I'm sorry, who are you again?" And she said, my name is Madison. And we started chatting a bit, and I learned, oh, she's an actor. She's from New York. This is her friend Sophie. What do you do? Why are you here? Sharing a bit about ourselves. And at the end of the encounter, we exchanged socials, and I sent her a script. She loved the script, so we talked about doing that together. And then from there, a friendship kind of blossomed based around, let's start making some stuff together. And her skills balance so well with my skills. I'm very much a creator. I like to play, I like to write, whereas she has such incredible business sense. So in terms of the producing side of things and making sure all the T's are crossed and all the I's are dotted and meeting the right people and knocking on the right doors, we've built this incredible company together. And it's called Screaming Goat Films. It was named by my son. My last name is Gauthier, and when I was getting the LLC done, I needed a film company name. And he's like, you should call it Screaming Goats because your last name is Gauthier. And like the YouTube videos about Screaming Goats are hilarious. And I said, you know what? That's not a bad idea. So I put in the name, see if it was available. Sure enough, it was. So that was the beginning of it. And together, we've produced two shorts. So one horror thriller called Stairwell, that we are going to be going to LA at the end of this month to promote as my quote unquote directorial debut. And then we have all of our TIFF stuff. And then I come back and then I head out to Newfoundland to shoot a show. And the racing car documentary kind of fell into our lap. Whereas once again, through the bartending scene, I had a customer of mine who had followed me throughout the years and said, I have a son who's a race car driver. We're looking for sponsors. Let's do some sort of a I scratch your back, you scratch mine. Whereas, I'll make you guys the sponsor of the car. If you could do some sort of a promo video, that would kind of help us out to get his name out there. And then when we started shooting the video, we learned more about Max's story and where he comes from and how difficult indie racing is and all that kind of stuff. And we said, you know what, there's a film here. There's an actual documentary here. So we scrambled and we scraped and we scrounged and we pulled something together that is going to be an absolutely incredible story. Very much David and Goliath kind of a story, because Max doesn't come from a lot of money, and these are 2, 3, $4 million cars. Just to practice for a race is upwards of $10,000 a practice session. So it's very much a rich man's game. And both coming from places where there's not a lot of money, we really liked the story. So we've developed this documentary, which is putting us on the map. And now we're getting phone calls and we're getting knocks on the door and using our radars to see, who's good, who's legit, who's just in it to kind of capitalize. So we're navigating as we go, but there's a lot of really, really good stuff coming out. And there's even better stuff coming for the company in 2026 that we're super excited about.
Nice. And John, I have time for one last question for you today.
Yeah,
With Chris, I really appreciate you being here. It's
of course.
what makes John Gauthier smile?
Entertaining. There's nothing else on this planet that gives me more joy than creating something that leaves people with an emotion, whether it makes them think, whether it makes them laugh, whether it makes them cry. If I can evoke an emotion from someone who sees my work, that will beat a paycheck any day of the week. I mean, don't get me wrong, we all have bills to pay, but if I can get something from someone in terms of an emotion or a reaction, then my soul is as full as it could ever possibly be.
No, I love that answer.
Yeah.
And as I said, it was the last question I had for you. Everyone out there, get to the Google, find out John Thomas Gauthier, head over to Screaming Goat Films, get in there before it's too late. It's going to be amazing. The documentary, which it's going to be absolutely fabulous, of course. Our guest today has been John Thomas Gauthier. Remember, everyone out there, to smile to inspire and have yourselves a fantastic day. John, thank you so much again for your time today.
Well, thank you, Chris. This was absolutely fantastic.